I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Town of Wendell Board of Commissioners and welcome you all. We're happy to have you here with us tonight. We're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Eastwake High School student Braylon Yarborough. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Braylon Yarborough is a senior at Eastwake High School, and he lives in Wendell with his parents, Tony and Mavis Yarborough, and his sister Brianna. Braylon is an honors student and was recently awarded the Levine, I'm not sure, scholarship to the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. The Levine Scholars Program takes the brightest, most capable students and gives them tools, resources, and the environment they need to explore the world around them, engage deeply in their communities, and excel across disciplines. The four-year scholarship includes full tuition, room and board, a grant to implement a service project of the scholar's own choice and design, and 4 summers of experiences that will develop leadership skills, social awareness, and an international perspective. The total value of this 4-year package is estimated at $105,000. Braylon also played football, runs outdoor track and indoor track, and a lot of people don't realize that's 2 separate seasons, but it is, at Eastwake High School, and he's earned many accolades there from most outstanding student to the Iron Warrior Award. He also supports his community by volunteering at his local church and food pantry. We wanted to have you here tonight and just tell you how very proud we are of you and all the things that you have already achieved. You have a bright, bright future, and congratulations on their scholarship. That's outstanding work. We're very proud of you.
Thank you.
I can't wait to see all the things I'm sure you will accomplish.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Braylon's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any adjustment of the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have 2 people signed up tonight for public comment period. Real quickly, public comment period is your opportunity to share comments with the town board on any topic as long as it's not an item scheduled for a public hearing. We have no public hearings tonight. The town board will receive comments, but it's not an opportunity for a back and forth exchange. They don't speak back. We want to thank everyone in the audience for respecting the business meeting and abstaining from speaking. During the audience, outbursts, laughter, applause, or anything like that, you are permitted 3 minutes during public comment. And when your time is up, it is absolutely up. You know what? It's not on my page. Okay, we'll get it in a minute.
Okay.
When your time is up, it's absolutely up. So, let's get started. Our first person tonight in public comment is Sir J. Kessel.
Hello.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hey, we provide support information for you.
Can you give us your name and address, please? for the
Sergey
record?
Castle, 235 Short Street.
Thank you.
Actually, I have a question for you. You're supposed to answer because we have a lot of things going on. City manager give an order to code enforcement officer not actually talk to me, not answer. Also, he kicked me out from when I ask him questions from a town hall. You know what it is. Problem open, and before you guys solve it, I can be all over. Because you guys flooded a house. You did development, Wendell Crossing next door to me, and actually guide water to me, and I find a lot of mistakes by engineer, by builder, and builder raised it up elevation about 24 inches and guide water to me. He not did intentionally, he did on purpose, because a builder, ex-mayor, which was 14 years, in your town, Janis Lucius, he knows exactly what's going on, and he have a general contractor license, and actually, when I tried to talk to him, he ignored my comments, and he just guide water and tried to flood my property, and on both sides. Also, I talked to I talk to environmental and make a pro bono option how to fix the water, and looks like nobody listen. You know, like now I just want a result. You know, just also I want to have a meeting with the city of mayor discussing and maybe bring agenda to next council meeting to provide some evidence and have some answers. Because my house do not take excuses. Maybe you guys can kick me out or wherever it is because we pay taxes, you know, like, and you guys supposed to improve the road, you know, not harm neighborhood. And also crazy fence, which is put like in between my property and development, it's ridiculous. If you drive around like what is Nightdale have it, they usually put like a bushes and improve neighborhood, not create a ghetto. For example, this is a new subdivision and this is the rest of neighborhood. It's not supposed to be like that. Put nice bushes, at least like improve neighborhood and infrastructural, not ruin people personal properties. Basically, this is it. I mean, if a city manager wanna tell me why he kicked me out from and not answer my question, and why he give code enforcement officer order not talk to me, because code enforcement officer, I'm not dating him, I just asking specific question, because when I catch him on a project, you know, like, I mean, outside, and I talked to him, and he told me, I have a specific order not talk to you. I turn around and go, that's why I'm here to try to find out why. Why? Can you answer? Why?
Your time's up, sir.
Your time is up?
The light's red, your time's up.
Sure, okay, I'll come back next time.
Next, Polina Voronsky. If you could give us your name and address, please, ma'am.
Polina Voronsky, 235 Short Street, the same address. I wanted to talk about sidewalk that next door, lot number 1 will be making. That sidewalk cuts right in the part of my driveway. It leads to nowhere practically. All the water that's going to be coming from the street will be dispersed into my driveway. And if you see the pictures that I distributed, there's a big issue with the water. The house next across the street is heavily flooded. The water is coming from a different street into our street, and it's all going down the drain. Then from the other side, it's going to be water coming from the sidewalk. That sidewalk is literally going to end in the corner of my lot, going nowhere. It's just to drain the water. I don't understand why it's even going to be there. What's the purpose of it? The calculation. Now, there's also a pipe that from the inlet that city of Wendell put, I believe, is taking to the pipe. That pipe ends in the middle of the lot. And after that, it's not going anywhere. It's just sitting there. It's on the lot number 1 on the Wendell Crossing subdivision, first lot. And it's going to be the way it's positioned, like it has to go in a zigzag way. It's not even flowing straight. The water doesn't know that you guys or they wanted that to go that way. It cannot go in a zigzag way. So the water going to be standing, getting out of pipe ends in the middle of the lot. I mean, why? Why can't he expand? Then there's the calculation supposed to be 2% of the length of the lot, or quarter-inch per foot. So it's about 48 inches, give or take. There's no anywhere that 48 inches incline for that water to go down. Obviously, there was somebody that interested in it. I don't understand. Or maybe they don't want to spend money, but the water is going to be from this side, from the other side, where that old pipe is. So we're pretty much going to be flooded. Next case, what I will be probably end up doing is inverse condemnation, because if my house is going to be destroyed, I will have to take action against city. I'm not going to let it ruined like what happened to that house that was on the corner lot where the Wendell Crossing is now built. I have some pictures from several years ago. It was practically fine. Then something happened. I'm raising question, maybe it was flooded as well. Then there's a view from the satellite that I can see the road was straight to where the Short Street and Wall Street. Now,
Ma'am,
if
your
you,
time's up, thank you.
okay, next
Real
time.
quickly,
Yeah.
can you give us your residential address?
235 Short Street.
Do you live in that house?
It's my house. I bought it for my kids.
Do you live there currently?
No,
Okay, give us your address where you live.
45161 Chelsea,
In
Raleigh.
Raleigh. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, tonight's invocation from the Wendell Council of Churches. We're going to hear from Karen Marsh from Covenant Presbyterian Church. Yes, ma'am, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Let us bow our heads and have a prayer. Heavenly Father, we lift up this town meeting to you. I pray, Father, for each individual that represents our town, that the meeting will be in order and problems will be resolved and peace will be about this community. Thank you, Lord, for this beautiful community in which we reside. And I ask all these things through the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. I would like to also take this opportunity to say the Wendell Council of Churches is going to be sponsoring a food drive. It begins on March the 28th, Saturday, where we'll be dispersing bags to the different neighborhoods, and then on the following Saturday, April the 4th, we'll go around and collect the bags of food. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the food drive.
Thank you.
All right, we have nothing on the consent agenda tonight. Let's move on into item number 4, recognitions, reports, and presentations. The first, item 4A, is the recognition of East Wake High School teacher Jonathan Hasbrook. So you can come stand at the podium. Jonathan Hasbrook began his career at Brick Township High School in Brick, New Jersey in 1986. Coach Hasbrook has been the athletic director at East Wake High School since 2008, having worked at several Wake County public schools dating back to 1991. Coach Hasbrook is a longtime Wendell resident and has achieved numerous coaching recognitions, such as Greater Neuse River Conference 4A Men's Soccer Coach of the Year twice, Greater Neuse River Conference 4A Women's Soccer Coach of the Year once, North Carolina East-West All-Star Coach in 2005, the TAAC Men's Soccer Coach of the Year once, TAAC Women's Soccer Coach of the Year once, the North Carolina 4A Women's Soccer Coach of the Year in 2004, the North Carolina Region 5 Women's Soccer Coach of the Year in 1998, 2002, and 2004, and the CAP 8 Women's Soccer Coach of the Year once. There's a lot of accolades. Coach Hasbrook has won numerous championships in addition to that over his coaching career from 1988 to the present. And in May of 2020, Coach Hasbrook will be retiring from the Wake County Public School System, where he has dedicated his time to teach, coach, and inspire our young people. East Wake High School wants to thank Coach Hasbrook for his dedication to education and the East Wake High School community. We just wanted to have you here tonight to thank you for everything you've done for our young men and women in Wendell. And I feel like you've been around as long as I have, a long, long time. So we really appreciate everything you've done for our young people. Don't know what we're going to do without you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Can I have a second?
You have the
to
floor,
thank
yes, sir.
Wendell? And I don't need a mic. I'm gonna speak this way, right now. First of all, thank you for the recognition, Wendell Board of Commissioners and Mayor Gray. I think Chris and I moved here 1995, and we lived in Wendell for 24 years. We've raised our 3 boys here, and when we moved 3 years ago, I wanted to say something in social media about Wendell and how indebted Kristen and I were. There were so many times that our 3 boys wore that Wendell across their chest. And I was very proud of them at that time, and I'm even prouder, more proud of them now. They went through Eastern Wake County Schools. They went through East Wake High School. 2 of them have a college education now. And one is working on his. He's going to be a rising junior at NC State now. I can't tell you how many times they represented Wendell, and they represented it the right way. And they were given the privilege, in my opinion, to represent Wendell in all-star games on Wendell Rams, in the summertime when they played for all-star teams. It was a privilege to play for Wendell. And Kristen and I, how much do we love Wendell? Heck, I'm married to Wendell. Karen and Dave Walter moved here from Wisconsin Square D in 1973. All right, and Dave was one of the first ones on the Wendell Parks and Rec board. Karen taught at Wendell Elementary School, so I'm getting a little emotional. But we have loved this town, and that is a great honor that you guys did for me tonight. But it goes out to my boys, my wife, her family also, and congratulations, Brandon, on an outstanding job at Eastway. So thank you very much. This town, you know, small town is a big charm.
Small town, big charm.
Oh, yes. All right, well, I'll tell you what, I double that down, and I want to thank you all.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. Somebody has big shoes to fill at Eastway High School. Item 4B is the presentation of the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Award, and we're going to hear from Senior Accountant Garrett Johnson. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the board. Like you said, those are big shoes to fill. But yes, the town of Wendell has been awarded the Distinguished Budget Award by the GFOA, that's the Government Finance Officers Association. We actually just received this plaque designating it as so last Friday. It's our first time applying for the award, and obviously the first time receiving it. So we're very thrilled about that. Just a little background on the award. It's similar to the CAFR award that the town submits for. It's kind of judged by a panel of professionals, government professionals that have obviously a strong background in governmental budgeting. But obviously, as you all know, a balanced budget is required by North Carolina General Statute, but by participating in this program, it goes above and beyond what the General Statute requires. It takes the board's strategic goal initiatives, it takes departments' challenges, awards, performance measures, what they want to keep track of, and obviously just budgeting information, historical, projected. So it's a great document. Before the program is a 26-page budget. It's now 121 pages. While it still has the same numbers and figures, it just tells a better picture of where the town's been and where it's kind of trying to shift towards. So with that being said, we have a video from the Executive Director of the GFOA, Chris Morrell.
Greetings from the Government Finance Officers Association. I'm Chris Morrell, GFOA's Executive Director. It is my honor to announce that the town of Wendell, North Carolina, has received the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. The purpose of this award program is to encourage and assist governments to prepare comprehensive and understandable budget documents to improve transparency and trust in government. To earn the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award, the town of Wendell met demanding program criteria. Such a record reflects the professionalism, commitment, and dedication of your organization's leaders. This is the first time that the town of Wendell has won this award. Program reviewers in particular praised the strategic planning section of the budget. Nice job. We hope that this award to the town will serve as an example and encourage others to strive for the same high standards in their own budget documents. Therefore, it is my privilege, on behalf of the Government Finance Officers Association, to present to the town of Wendell this Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. Congratulations.
So as Chris said, one of the big things that the town was praised on was the strategic initiatives, which when Manager Collins came in, that was a big thing I think he wanted to bring to the town is get us strategic initiatives and goals in place. So the GFOA noticed that and appreciated that. We're in the middle of the budget session or season right now, so we'll be finishing that and submitting for our next time around. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be glad to hear them, but otherwise, we're really proud for this award and looking forward to the next one.
Are there any questions from the board?
Garrett, I'm assuming just a little bit's changed since you started.
Oh, a whole lot, absolutely. Just in the 4 years or so that I've been here, it's totally different, absolutely.
It's a high honor. It's also not something that is going to get a lot of notice or praise, but it's an important one. This is how the town effectively communicates how they're spending taxpayer dollars. So in all honesty, it's the most important document that you see because it detailed lays out how we spend it, where we're going to spend it. So I think the fact our finance department is looking at national and international standards and holding themselves to that line is a really good thing, and I'm very happy to see it.
Congratulations. These things don't just happen without a lot of hard work.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate the transparency and the additional information provided. I think taxpayers appreciate that. And it's always nice to be recognized outside of our little bubble that we're in all the time. So you made us very proud, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, next, item 4C is our Census 2020 presentation. Good evening, Janine.
Good evening, Mayor. Oh, sure, thank you. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Commissioners. So, we are about to embark on the 2020 census. And just for a little bit of background, the census is a counting of every person residing in the U.S. every 10 years and is conducted by the U.S. Census Bureau. And this census 2020 will consist of 9 questions and will be available in 12 languages. The cards that are coming in the mail will start going out next week, actually. Oh, the 12th to the 20th, that's next week. That's this week. That's this week. Sorry. The census is important because it provides a basis for distributing more than $675 billion in federal funds annually to states and local communities, which means distribution of $16 billion annually to North Carolina. It is key in funding programs which impact housing, education, transportation, employment, healthcare, and public policy. Also, the information gained from the census is vitally important to community planning and economic development, and also provides a basis for reapportioning congressional seats. For the first time ever, the 2020 census will have an option for online self-response. Toll-free and traditional questionnaires, which will only be sent to households that have not responded by April 8th, are secondary options, and enumeration, that's when the caseworker goes door to door, is the non-response follow-up plan. All people living in the United States are required by law to be counted, and the Census Bureau is bound by law to protect responses for 72 years and will be kept confidential. Individual responses are combined with information from other households to provide statistics on the community. Many communities have historically been undercounted in the census. That means that the census data used to ensure fair political representation and provide funding that supports community services is skewed. There are 4 main reasons why a population might be undercounted. The first is they might be hard to locate, like people who live off the grid are very mobile or don't wish to be found. The second is they might be hard to contact, like people who live in gated communities or are younger than 5. And young children were the largest undercounted group in 2010. They might be hard to interview, meaning they might have low literacy, or there might be a language barrier. Or, number 4, they might be hard to persuade, meaning that they're suspicious of the government and don't see a benefit to participating in the census. So in 2010, the town of Wendell was at 76% participation rate, which was under the Wake County rate of 78%. As a whole, Wake County has a goal of 82% participation rate for 2020. And town staff has been working toward achieving this goal through regular postings on our social media, setting up information tables at town events, being invited by HOAs and other community groups to speak to people and hand out information in English and Spanish, which I believe Megan gave you a copy of the cards that we've been handing out. And just this past week, staff created a video for the census that will be posted on all the town's communication platforms later this week. So the timeline is between March 12th and 20th. An invitation to respond online will be sent to all the local households. Then between the 16th and the 24th, another postcard will be sent out. And then on April 1st, that's National Census Day. So that's the day that everybody has to respond, or should respond. And then there's another reminder postcard between the 26th and April 3rd, and then if there wasn't a response after the 1st. And then another reminder letter and a paper questionnaire on between the 8th and the 16th, and then a final reminder between the 20th and 27th, and if there still wasn't a response, then a person will show up at the door. And that is basically how it will work. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer any questions.
Are there any questions about the census? Comments? All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, item D is our compensation and classification study implementation. We're going to hear from David Hill and Bob Carter, who are management analysts at Piedmont Triad Regional Council.
As their presentation's being loaded up, I would remind the board and for the public's benefit that the compensation classification study's been a long-term goal of the board. It's within our personnel policy to update regularly to see how our compensation and classification system compares to our market. And it was included as part of Goal 5, organizational goals within your strategic plan adopted in 2019.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Well, good evening, and it's certainly our pleasure to be here. I'm at the tail end of what I've had for the past 2 weeks. I'm not sure what it is. I caught it after a trout fishing trip to the Chattahoochee River, North Georgia, and I'll keep my social distance from most people because I have absolutely no idea.
Did you at least catch a lot of fish?
We didn't catch a whole lot of fish.
All right, well,
But that's why they call it fishing.
I understand.
Otherwise, it would be called catching, I guess.
That's right.
I am David Hill. With me is Bob Carter. We're both retired North Carolina local government employees. We work as management analysts with Piedmont Triad Regional Council of Government. That's the COG in the Greensboro, Winston-Salem area. It's a 72-member COG covering all the communities from Winston, Greensboro, all the way up to the Virginia line and almost down to the South Carolina line. But obviously, Bob and I work all across the state. We're not just restricted to that area. You have in your packet our report to the manager, which contains the detailed information of our study, our findings, and our recommendations. The presentation that I'll give this evening will be more of an overview, talk about the methodology, talk about some of the issues we looked at, what we considered, and basically where you were at the beginning of the study and where we think, based on all the market data, you should position yourself. The first set of slides we're going to take a look at is the data that we took at the very beginning of the study. This is a workforce analysis study. It's just a bunch of graphs and charts, but it provides to us that initial view of what the local government looks like. So it's just an overview of workforce analysis, looking at a couple of different areas of concern to us. But before I get to those slides, I want to talk to you about, we want to, as a backdrop to the slides we're going to take a look at, will be the bell curve, standard deviation. I think most of us learned that somewhere in school. I forgot exactly where it was. We don't use this standard deviation or that model to make any decisions. We use this model to create a picture, a view of who you are. So as we go forward, this needs to be viewed as the backdrop of the slides we're going to take a look at. Now, in a mature workforce, and our definition of mature workforce is any employee who's been in their position a minimum of 8 years, who knows their job, who is performing their job, they know all of the elements of the position, they're competent and proficient in doing their job. You will find in probably, I think, the next slide that your average length of employment in each position is 8.1 years. So for us, that's just barely into the threshold of being a mature workforce. With that said, in a mature workforce, you should be able to find about 2/3 of your employees in that middle 1/3 of that bell curve. And that's whether you measure employee performance, that could be length of employment, that could be, we use that same model to demonstrate what a salary range is, with a salary grade minimum being on the far left side. The market value of a position would be in the center of that. The maximum salary for a pay grade would be on the far right side. So in a mature workforce, we would expect to find 2/3 of whatever we are measuring in the middle 1/3 of that. So as we begin to look at the next slides, keep that visual in mind, because the very first thing we took a look at was how long have your employees been working for you. So again, at the bottom, you can see that your average years of employment here is 8.1 years. So that's barely into or crossing over that threshold of a mature workforce. We would expect to have seen more of those bars in the center part. And I do apologize, we do not have a technical ability to reproduce a bell curve. What you will see in these next couple of slides more resembles the St. Louis Arch. Maybe one day we'll be able to reproduce a bell curve, but not tonight. As you can see from the narrative down below, you've got almost 40% of your employees who've been with you less than 2 years. You've got almost half of your employees who've been with you less than 5 years. And then you can see 64% have been with you less than 10 years. What those bars represent at the beginning of the study were the number of employees who began work in each of those years who are still employed. So what this does not show you is the number of employees who actually were employed in each of those years, just the number of employees who were employed in each of those years who are still with you. You can see the date of the data is, I think, October, the middle of October. So you can see that high bar on that far left side. There were about 14 new employees who came to work for you up till the middle of October. What's not shown here, of course, because this is a snapshot of at the beginning of the study, is we don't know how many employees have come to work since that time. But we would have expected to have seen more employees. So what that tells us is that you may have been employing a lot of people each of those years, and for some reason they're no longer here, or that you just did not have a need for the number of employees and you only hired 2 or 3 or 4 each year. You will see that there are a number of years in that slide that there were no employees who were at least employed during those years who are still with you. So you can see the majority, the weight of that scale is to the far left side. So with that, then, when we took a look at where are employees' salaries in relation to their particular pay grade range? And again, the St. Louis Arch represents the 50% range of your current pay grade scale. From your minimum salary in each pay grade to the maximum salary is 50%. The maximum is 50% greater than the minimum. The black bar in the center is back to the bell curve. That would be that center part of the bell curve. That's the midpoint of your salary range. So an employee who would have a salary at midpoint of your range would have a salary at 25% above minimum, which is that little tiny black bar in the center. As you can see, again, the weight of that scale is to the far left side, which doesn't really concern us because the slide before you had a lot of employees on the left side anyway. You have a large number of new employees. Those new employees just have not had the opportunity or the time to have advanced across their salary grade range. But you can see you have over half of your employees with salaries less than 5% above minimum, almost 60%. That's what salary compression looks like. You do have a number of long-serving employees. You do have 2 employees who have salaries that exceed the maximum. But for the most part, that scale pretty well mirrors the one before it. You do have a lot of brand new employees or relatively new employees. Their salaries are expected to look about like that because they just haven't been here long enough to have their salaries advance. This is a comparison of all the full-time regular employees in each of these local governments. Each one of those bars represents a local government, and we'll take a closer look at those in a couple of minutes, but those are the local governments that were included in your study. And this is nothing more than a measurement of the average actual salary of all the regular full-time employees in each of those local governments. Does not include part-time, seasonal, temporary. It's only measuring the full-time regular employees. So just measuring Wendell against that particular market, your average employee salary is 11.5% below the average of those other local governments. So just to give you a little background, some overview of the pay study from the very beginning. We were contacted, we came down and met with the management team. We began that conversation about the study, the logistics, the timelines, and so forth. We came down and met in this room. We had employee kickoff sessions where we met with groups of employees to explain the study, to explain to them what the study was, what the study was not, but just the methodology, what our expectations were of their participation in the study. We talked about and reviewed and gave to employees a 12-page position questionnaire. That position description questionnaire is 12 pages where employees and their supervisor tell us everything about their position. What they do, how they do it, what do they do it with, how often do they do it, every element of their job. And it's from that we use the data to, when we take a look at all the market data from all the other local governments, we want to make sure that we're comparing police officers to police officers and this classification A to A, knowing that there is not a classification in any local government in the state of North Carolina that is a 100% match of a similar classification. If we can get about an 85% match in duties, responsibilities, and authorities, that's about as close as you can get. You would think that a manager is a manager is a manager, or a police officer is a police officer is a police officer. Police, for the most part, they are. But there's always that 10 to 15% of other duties and responsibilities that are unique to each local government. So if we can get about an 85% match, then we're really good. So employees completed that questionnaire. The questionnaires were returned to us. We came back on site, and in this room, we spent some time interviewing individual employees, gaining additional information about their job, what they did, to help us better understand, to help us do those matches. We collected a lot of information about Wendell employees, salaries, and everything about them. At the same time, we're collecting a lot of that same data from those market local governments We then go through that process of comparing and measuring and analyzing. We come up with some preliminary findings and some preliminary recommendations. We came back on site, we met with the management team, we reviewed those, back and forth a lot of times with what ifs and take a look at this option, that option. And we did take a look at a very large number of options about here's where you are, here's where everybody else is. Here are the few or numbers of options that we can talk about that can get you from here to there. So we developed the report to the manager. That's the report that you have in your agenda packet. And then, of course, tonight's presentation. One of the very first things that we took a look at was your current pay plan. And this is your current pay plan that you're looking at there. Now, your range is 50%. You can see that that's consistent from the top grade to the last grade. But when you get over to the far right side, that differential is the measurement from one grade to the next. Typically, that's a 5% differential. When you're moving from one level of duties, responsibilities, and authorities to the next level of duties, responsibilities, and authorities, there needs to be at least a minimum of a 5% differential. Otherwise, there would be no need for all of these pay grades. You would just advance people horizontally. But you can see that beginning up at the top, somewhere along the line, the calculations got off track, and you're not exactly 5%, you're 5.9, 5.8. You can see there's some 5.5s, or 4.4s rather. Those being early in the schedule caused a great difference going down the schedule. So basically what we did, we took your current schedule, the one on the left, and what we did, we call it smoothing. We just took your current schedule and just created that standard 50% range and that standard consistent 5% differential throughout. But you can see on the far right side of that slide that by the time you get down to grade 18, or 19, and 20, those ranges have already moved up about 2% because we're making up the loss of 0.4%, 0.5%, as we're moving forward. And then you can see as we get near the bottom of the schedule, those bottom numbers are about 3.2% greater than the numbers over on the left side. That is nothing other than the result of taking some inconsistent differentials and making a consistent 5% differential. Here's a better look at those local governments that we included in the study. And what we look for is a good geographical representation of those employers who are closest to you, who are more like who you are, who deliver similar services. But we also have to take a look at who are those employers that are very close to you who are direct competitors for labor. Who are those direct competitors for police officers, for public works employees, for finance directors, or any other position that you may be advertising for. So there's where you see the Wakes and the Raleighs and those kinds of places are up there because those are all direct competitors for labor. And what they pay does matter when we do studies like this. I'm going to use police officer as the example. Now, when we collect data from all of these other local governments, this is what our initial worksheet looks like. And again, this particular example is police officer, and this is the only one I'm going to show you tonight, but every one of your classifications has a worksheet just like this, where Wendell's data is down there at the bottom in that lower yellow colored line. All of the other local governments that appear above that, we collect the pay grade that police officer is in, the minimum, the midpoint, the maximum. And there in the center, we also collected what the average salary was for a police officer in each of those classifications or each of those local governments. We measure comp ratio, and I'll talk more about that in just a couple of moments. We also measure what their pay grade range is, and you can see it ranges anywhere from 48 to 71. But this is the basic police officer 1 in Wake County Deputy Sheriff. But underneath you can see that your police officer is in current grade 19, a minimum of 42,371. You can see just below that the average and the median is listed there. You currently are 1.6% below the market average, which is not bad. But remember, in the slide before this, we smoothed out those ranges, and by the time we got to grade 19, it increased 1.8%. So you can see there on the bottom, grade 19 now is 43,055, which places you $4 in annual salary above the average. Now, going forward, we will talk about that because that is catching you up. That is getting you up to market for these particular classifications. Police officers currently in grade 19, our recommendation is that police officer remain in grade 19 because now that pay grade range is now equal to the average of the market. Now, looking over on the right side, you can see that your average police officer, again, at the beginning of the study was making 42,471. The average police officer's salary in all of those other places is 46,683. So you're right at 10% below market in actual salaries. Now, a lot of that may have to do with you have a lot of new, you can see from the slides earlier, you have a lot of brand new employees. So if you have police officers who have been with you a relatively short period of time, we could expect their salaries to be on that lower end of the schedule. And that's very evident in this schedule, or this slide right here. So the position itself is almost at market, but with the adjustment, it self-corrected itself to be at market. You do have an issue where you're about $4,200 below average on actual salary. And again, I'm just showing the police officer one as the example of how we gather the data, some of the things that we look at and how we analyze that data and use the data. Every one of your classifications has a worksheet just like this. So from all of that data, that comparison, that analysis, our meetings and back and forths and talking about the different options, our recommendation is that you take our recommendation of the recommended pay plan, which appears near the very end of the report that you have. And that report places every one of your positions in the pay grade that is closest to being at market when compared to that average market for each of those classifications. Now, one of the other things that we talk about, and we do have some samples and examples of that in your packet, is to develop a salary administration philosophy. It follows along the lines of a mission statement, a vision statement. The local government may have a mission or a vision statement. This particular statement becomes the third leg of that. I'll just make this up, obviously. You may have a mission statement that Wendell wishes to be the greatest local government in the state of North Carolina and the greatest deliverer of services in the state of North Carolina. Well, it's the employees that then make it possible for you to actually be that. This particular examples that we have in the packet allow you to give some thought to putting together this philosophy of who you wish to be as an employer. Do you want to lag behind? Do you want to be the leader? It's just that philosophy of making some identification of who you wish to be as that employer to attract and retain the kinds of employees that you want working here that will allow you to then meet and deliver that standard of vision or mission statement that you have. We also recommend that you focus on the minimum, that you focus on the midpoint of each salary range. You have to be market competitive at the low end. Each and every time you advertise a vacancy, whether it be for police officer or whatever that classification may be, your advertised salary has to at least be market competitive to at least get the kinds of candidates to apply that you hope would apply. If you're advertising a position that's several $1,000s lower than everybody else, you probably are not going to get those kinds of candidates applying for positions that you hope to. The midpoint is the actual market value of the position, back to that center highest point of that bell curve. The focus on that midpoint is to bring employees in. The retention of those employees is moving them systematically across the range till they get to the midpoint. And the midpoint should be the goal. Back to the average market value of that employee who's been with you 8 to 10 years. If they truly are performing their job, if they truly are that proficient employee that you want, if they've been with you about 8 to 10 years, their salary should be about the midpoint of the range. So the focus should be on the minimum, focus should be on the midpoint. You do have some current career path progressions in place. I think police has that, public works has that, finance, I think, has that. You have some good plans already in place. I think there are some things that could be added to that. Consideration should be given to how do you apply that to a brand new employee coming to work here. If somebody's coming to you with 8 to 10 years of experience, do they start at that entry-level salary? Or do you have that ability to look at their background and bring them to work at a salary that's commensurate with that 8 to 10 years of experience? So those are just some bullet. There's greater detail in the study. But at the bottom line of all of that, if you take all of that into consideration, and we did take a look at a number of options, the one that I'm going to present to you right now is the one that to all of us seemed to be the best option to get you headed in the direction that I think you as a board and the manager wish to go with this pay plan. But the recommendation is to, of course, move the specific positions to the pay grade that puts them in that market competitive position, and then place each employee's salary on that new range at the same comp ratio they held or they currently hold in their current pay grade range. Comp ratio is nothing more than that relative position of where is my salary compared to the midpoint of my salary range. And if we go back to that bell curve, if you looked at that center point, that comp ratio would be 1.00 if my salary was at midpoint. If my comp ratio was less than 1.00, that means my salary is less than market. If my salary is greater than 1 point, and you can see, if we just go back to the police officer, you can see that there are no police officers whose salaries are at midpoint. And this is standard across the state of North Carolina because typically employees do not stay in this entry-level police officer 1 classification long enough to get to midpoint. They either get in and get out, or they get in, they're good officers, they get promoted to police officer 2 or sergeant or whatever that next progression position is. But the comp ratio column that you see there, you can see that your average police officer salary is comp ratio of 0.8, which means that it's closer to the minimum than the midpoint. And you can see you're at 42.4, your minimum is 42.3. So if my comp ratio, okay, let's look at Wake County. Their average is 0.90. So let's suppose that I'm a police officer here. My individual comp ratio is 0.90. When we go to the new schedule, I'm going to go to my new pay plan, and my new salary is going to be placed at that same 0.90 comp ratio that I presently hold on my current schedule. So if I'm at 0.80, I'm going to be at 0.80, or if I'm at 1.0, I'm going to be at 1.00. So our recommendation here is to take all of your employees, move them to that market-supported pay grade, put their salary, place their salary at the same comp ratio. And the reason for that, go back to that slide where all of your salaries are over on that far left side. You already have salary compression. If you don't move employees to the new pay grade range and put them at least where they currently are on the current schedule, that means that their salary is going to just be either at minimum or barely above minimum. It's not going to be at the 0.90 or the 1.00. It's going to be down here at the 0.80. If you did that and we came back and did that same metric calculation, you probably would just have one bar on the far left side. Every employee's salary would be down here at the minimum. This is one of those tactics, a strategy, at least move employees from their current comp ratio onto the new schedule at that same comp ratio. Don't move them and have them start all over again at the minimum. And you don't have a lot of employees whose salaries are very far across the range anyway. So if employees got moved to the new schedule, the new pay grades, you would just be taking a picture of that one slide, showing where everybody's position is, and reproducing it on the new schedule. Everybody would look just like they are. They would just be in a different pay grade. But in the case like a police officer is still going to be in grade 19, but grade 19 is about 2% greater than it was before. With all of that said, if we make all of those movements, the cost of salaries is going to be almost $307,000. And then when you add about 23% for FICA retirement, 401k, that's going to add another almost $71,000. The total cost is going to be about $378,000. But with that said, you'll see the note below that $135,000 of that comes in the creation of 2 new positions, one in the police department and human resources. How did I forget that one?
The CALIA manager for the police department that didn't start to January didn't have a salary and position that was caught in the initial data. Then obviously a midterm addition of a position for HR. So those 2 are in the budget and budgeted and already projected forward, but it would be considered new money for this study. But it's already been accounted for from finance and staff when the positions were approved.
By making these adjustments, your average salary will move to within 0.5%. And if you look at that bar graph comparison, you will then have moved from that 11.1% differential up to just 0.5%. But again, what this is doing is catching you up to the average of everybody else now. If all of those other local governments follow what they have done in the last 4 or 5 years, on average, all of those other bars are going to go up about 2% on and after July 1st. So these recommendations are catching you up to the current minimum. On and after July 1st, if there are no other adjustments or any other salary administration initiatives that you take a look at, you're going to be about 2% behind this same market. So if you wanted to go back to the slide before this, we could add about 2% more to salaries. That would get you 2% greater than that, which then would mean on and after July 1st, you would still be the average. But that would be an additional 2% to your current salaries numbers. So with that said, one of the things we did do, we took, based on our interviews with individual employees, based on all the information that we received or collected through the position description questionnaires, we did review and update all of your job descriptions. We returned those to the city. Each of the department directors looked at that. We made some modifications in some of them, but you now have in place current job descriptions for each of your classifications. So with that said, I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I went through a bank merger and dealt with this previously. And I just want to commend you. It's a pretty tedious topic to discuss. I commend you. You did a nice job in the amount of time that you had.
Thank you, sir.
I would also remind the board that no action is being requested tonight, that the adoption of the pay and classification system is part of your budget approval. That's where that's done annually, as set forth in the personnel policy.
This is something we've been talking about for quite some time, so thank you. And I echo it is tedious, but thank you.
Well, and this does not terminate our relationship, of course, as you go
Right.
forward and you talk about implementation, and when you get to that point, we'll be glad to
Right,
continue the conversation.
just getting started.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think there is a question.
In your experience long-term, because it seems to always get out of whack, obviously ours was the 5% number range changing. Does the range of the actual position affect overall employee realignment when they're jumping?
I used police officer as an example. I probably could have used a different one. Police officer stayed in that same grade, even though the range itself moved up about 2%. There were some classifications that actually moved up 1 or 2 pay grades. So for each pay grade, that was a 5% movement. A 2-grade movement obviously would be a 10% movement.
I just got one other question. Said at the beginning, 11.5%. Obviously, the recommendation is within 0.5% of that. It seems like a lot of work to have gone to find the true midpoint. We've said your analogy all night was a bell curve and talked about the emphasis of hitting the midpoint. It would seem to me that if we're going to spend 11%, we could spend 11.5% and hit the midpoint since. I think by all accounts of anybody that's watched that presentation, the midpoint was the crux of your presentation.
Correct, but remember, midpoint is that salary where that trained, and not to say that a new employee is not competent in their position, but you would expect an employee salary to be at midpoint by about that 8th, 9th, or 10th year. So if I've only been with you 3 or 4 years, 5 years, my salary doesn't necessarily need to be at midpoint, but I need to at least be moving in that direction, and that maybe by the 8th year, my salary is at that midpoint. If you and I were in the same position, doing the same work, you've been doing it for 8 years, I've just been doing it for 2 years, our level of performance, our level of competency may be equal, but you've been doing it for 8 years. And that's not to say that just because you've been here 6 years longer than I have, that your salary should be at midpoint and mine should be somewhere down closer to the minimum. But I think there should be some differential, and we do have lots of models that create salary range placements based on length of employment or how long employees actually been working in their current position. So again, using us as an example, we may have started off working together as police officers. 8 years later, I'm still functioning as a police officer. You're now a sergeant. So we've both been here working for the town the same length of time. I've been in my current position for 8 to 10 years. Your promotional opportunities have reduced the number of years that you've been in your current position. You may have just been recently promoted to sergeant. Even though you've been employed 8 to 10 years, your time in position may be 1 year. We have models, we have,
Abbreviate my question, 1 at 11.5% instead of 11.
That 0.5% is spread out among all of the positions, so just giving a flat 0.5% wouldn't be equal across. Each position has its own breakdown and change based on the data and where they are, and that would have to go back and be worked out. So this gets us as close to market without deviating with some above and some below. It gets us within 0.5% on average. There's still the question of moving people in range to recognize the value of the work that they do in the coming year. And so that's an additional incremental adjustment beyond comp and class that would be considered in the budget. You don't have to worry about a market increase, a cost of living adjustment, because this is setting it within 0.5% of market average, so cost of living is covered here. But you still have to look at the workforce that's working into next year and moving them into the range to avoid compression, so that the police officers are moving forward, the sergeants are moving forward, the public works employee moves forward in their range to recognize the skills that they've learned and are using in the coming year, moving them towards that midpoint. So that's a separate adjustment that, Commissioner, that addresses your concern that we need to look at what resources are available in the budget and then make that adjustment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As a percentage, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding all the numbers correctly, as a percentage, the average employee would see a raise of about?
It very dependent on the position and where they were in the market. So it wouldn't be, and also looking at the number of employees that are on the lower end of that scale, that might have a smaller market adjustment as a result of this. If you're at a bottom end of the scale and you're way out of line with market average, you might have a larger percentage increase. So it's where an individual job classification within the market, what their deficiency is, and getting them.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I'm asking on average, what?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to hedge a little bit, because I don't want our workforce to hear that on average they're getting X% increase, and then they see an increase that's less than this because their position's not changing grades.
Or someone else gets one much more,
Right.
and that seems,
So
yeah.
we'll be communicating out to the workforce that the pay and class study, the market rate adjustment for this, and then the proposed recommended increase in the budget is this to move you forward, and this is the combined impact. And that way, individual employees are communicated out their position, have a chance to discuss that with staff.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much.
thank you.
Item 4E is our planning board comparative analysis. I'm going to hear from Assistant to the Manager, Stephanie Smith. Good evening.
Good evening. Tonight I am bringing you some information to compare planning boards in Wake County. This is a result of the discussion at the January 25th organizational retreat to determine if the current size of the Wendell Planning Board is appropriate or if the board would like to consider changing the number of seats available. I have prepared a breakdown of each town in Wake County with the number of board members as well as information on how many ETJ seats they currently have. Not asking for a decision at this point, but just bringing this information forward for the board to consider whether they are happy with the number of Wendell Planning Board members, or if that's something that they would like to direct staff to come back with an alternative option. Happy to answer any questions. All right. Any comments or questions?
What's the average attendance of these meetings as far as members? Do we normally have all 9 members?
I'd have to call on our planning director.
So we've obviously been one person down for a little while, but in general, attendance is very good. I mean, I'd say you're usually missing one person or possibly 2, but attendance of this planning board is probably better than the majority of our advisory boards.
I only asked because one of the reasons I was told historically we had a larger number on the planning board was to make sure we had plenty of, a quorum, and make sure we had plenty of people if we had absences. So if absences aren't an issue, we could perhaps look at trending this number.
Any other comments or questions?
What's the perceived, or I guess, is there a perceived benefit of the side? Do we know that planning boards of 6 or planning boards of 10 do better than planning boards of?
Not necessarily. Looking at the comparative analysis with the other municipalities, we're pretty in line with what other towns in the county are doing. So unless the board directed a change, I don't think that staff would necessarily recommend changing that number at this point.
Yeah. It's interesting information, but we are right in line with everyone, right in the middle. Right. Any other comments or questions?
I'd just point out, looking at the ETJ seats, there's a formula and statute that derives that. Even though the town could reduce ETJ seats, given the growth and development pressure outside of the corporate limits of town, having that additional representation in the unincorporated areas of our ETJ gives a little more voice and guidance to people that may not be in the community today that may be coming in. So erring on the side of participation and inclusion would be recommended by staff.
Yeah, I would definitely not want to reduce the ETJ seats. I don't know how everyone else feels about it, but. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 4F, parking ordinance amendment presentation. We can hear from the town manager. Good evening, Mr. Collins.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. This one's been heading towards us for a while. The opportunity to look at the parking ordinance and look for updates represents a lot of new development that's occurring within the town. A lot of the new developments like Wendell Falls have restrictive covenants that guide parking. They also have dedicated streets for public purpose. And so one of the things we have to look is as those streets become public streets, how are we taking on that parking enforcement and enforcement within those public roads, making sure our ordinance helps with a smooth transition from privately maintained and enforced streets to publicly maintained and enforced streets. And so the staff reviewed our existing ordinance. The proposed text amendments are actually fairly limited to get it in line and apply the principle of keep it simple. I'll go through those briefly with you. One is in section 24-90. It's change in language in number 3. It's actually just setting our language consistent with state law. So we compared versus general statute and make sure that any changes in general statutes were reflected in the ordinance while we were looking at it. The rest of them, all the way down to 18, there was a restrictive covenant that also looked very suitable with the greenways and trailheads that the town's looking at constructing moving forward, to not block any trailhead or parking upon a public greenway, getting that added into our ordinance. The final one, number 19, deals with specifically in the Wendell Falls subdivision. I put down public or private streets because I'm trying to look at who the end user, the customer, the citizen is in this case, as opposed to whether it's a public street or private street and our ability to enforce on it. The town does not enforce parking on private streets and alleyways, and we won't at any point moving forward. However, a resident looking at this ordinance might have curiosity about when, in proximity to like a holiday, there's allowances to park on the streets, and what processes. If someone wanted to have a block party like the rest of the town, what's the process to close a small section of street? And so this lays that out, and it follows a process consistent with what we use with the rest of the town, though it specifically mentions Wendell Falls. And that is that a minor street closing, would be similar to how they come currently to the manager's office and request to close a cul-de-sac or a small section of street for a minor event, and we would continue doing that. Currently in Wendell Falls, they approach the HOA and request that currently, so they'll still go to the HOA, and the HOA will forward that request for a minor street closing to the manager's office. The second one, it would be a more major one. There's certain dates within a certain period of time that the no parking on the street is waived under the restrictive covenants. If you put yourself in the mind of some of the decisions you have tonight, later on, as a board, y'all decide when certain public streets are closed for what purposes. And so it's as simple as creating that annual list of the days that those streets are going to be closed for certain purposes, and then you using your authority as the elected body to close those streets or allow parking on those streets during those periods of time. So it's the same exercise of power that you use for a special event that you would be using for the street closing or allowing parking in Wendell Falls for holidays. It's as simple as that. Newland's had a chance to review that the last couple weeks. They'll also be here at the next meeting requesting the town to formally accept roads and have a couple other matters. So the timing of this is coordinated with those streets becoming public streets. Happy to answer any questions you may have tonight or at any time in the next couple weeks.
Anyone have any questions? All right. Thank you. Let's move to item 4G, snapshot.
I'm available if the board has any questions about any of the reports in their packets.
Are there any questions? Did y'all make any note of any questions? Any questions, comments? Let's move on. Item number 5, we have no public hearings scheduled for tonight. So we're going to move into our administrative items. Item 6A is a minor street closing for Spring Into the Arts on Cypress Street. We're going to hear from Mr. Bergmark. Good evening, Mr. Bergmark.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the board. This item is a minor street closing for the Spring of the Arts Walk event. It's to be held May 2nd. We're looking to set up the town square as well as the Women's Club lot, and looking to close that section of Cypress Street between those two blocks to just make it safer for pedestrian access, as well as to set up some vendors and the chalk artists within that area. In general, the event's between 9 and 3. The art auction is later that night, but the main event is between those hours, so we're looking to give a little bit of buffer around that, close down the section between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., and looking for your permission to do so. Be happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion, read it for action, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, to close Cypress Street between 3rd and 2nd Street for the Spring of the Arts Walk on May the 2nd.
All right, so we have a motion to approve a minor street closing on Cypress between 3rd and 2nd for the Spring into the Arts event. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Item 6B is the Wendell Wine and Beer Festival road closure and alcohol waiver. I'm going to hear from Assistant Manager Stephanie Smith again.
Good evening again. This item is a request to approve temporary road closure for Wendell Wine and Beer Festival and allow alcohol permitted in the areas of the town square. This is an event hosted by 3rd Street Social, scheduled for April 18th, 2020. The event will be held at the town square and Women's Club lot from 1 p.m. until 6 p.m. Setup in the town square will begin in the morning. Cypress Street will close at that point. 3rd Street will close a little bit later. This is a private event, not sponsored by the town, and requires the purchase of a ticket to enter. So we have listed the areas that the applicant is requesting closure. We included language of the ordinance for alcohol, how it needs to be permitted by the town board. We are working closely with Mr. Ellis to appropriately provide staff depending on ticket sales leading up to the event. The closure of 3rd Street is requested to accommodate a larger number of event attendees and may be adjusted depending on actual ticket sales. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Madam Mayor,
Mm-hmm.
motion to approve the requested temporary road closures for the Wendell Wine and Beer Festival and allow alcohol in permitted areas of town square.
All right, we have a motion to approve the temporary road closure and allow the alcohol sales in permitted areas of town square. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Let's move into our other business, item 7A, update on board committees by town board members. Tonight, we're going to hear from Commissioner Joyner, Wendell Volunteer Fire Department Board of Directors.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Fire Department Board of Directors met last Thursday and discussed the upcoming budget process, which they started with Wake County, as well as the impending opening of the new station on Taylor Road, which will be next month, May.
Official ribbon cutting is middle of May,
Yeah.
but probably soft open if the fire station can do that.
And the fire department is going through the process of hiring 9 new individuals, which also means they're promoting a variety of individuals. So they will have a lot of moving and changing in their department as they make that shift. So a lot of changes on the horizon for the department in the coming months.
Okay. Moving to our commissioners' comments. Stay with Commissioner Joyner.
Nothing tonight besides the fact that I do believe I'll be absent of the next meeting.
Commissioner Boyette.
I just want to say how pleased I am with all the reports we received and comments we received. But I'm especially excited about the employee compensation plan that we were presented tonight. We have, lots of very capable, very committed employees, and they do their best for the town, and they deserve to get the best from the town. And so I was real happy to see that presentation, and I look forward to working that into the budget, and approving it later on. And also, like I said, congratulations to the Lady Wolfpack on their ACC championship.
And the wrestling.
And the rest.
And wrestling team, yes.
Commissioner
No
Tardasky?
comments tonight.
Commissioner Lutz?
No comments tonight, ma'am.
Commissioner Deloach?
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
All right, real quickly, thanks to the Parks and Rec, Princesses in the Park was a huge success. It's always so cute to me, all those little kids and those little girls, when those princesses start singing, they know the words to all that stuff, and they're very aggressive in their excitement about seeing those princesses too, who about need security in there sometimes. Quick reminder, Saturday, March 21st, it's gonna be a busy day in Wendell. The Pro Town BMX is going to be in our downtown for 2 shows, I believe at 11 and 2. And you can have autograph sessions and bike clinics after both of those. So that's always a fun thing to do, to bring your kids. If you don't have a bike, they have bikes and helmets there that you can use. Also, earlier in the morning that day, we're going to have our Community Arbor Day celebration, and that's going to be at 10. So you can come downtown, come to the Arbor Day celebration, and then catch the BMX show, and then eat and shop. But we're going to hear a little bit about the history of Arbor Day and have some games, plant a tree in town, which is always fun because children later on they can help, and then they can see the tree and watch it grow. And when they go by, I've had several of them remind me of how they help plant the trees at various places in the town square and at their schools. The ones who help also get a free cone of ice, so that's very exciting. So come out and join us for that. And just real quickly, belated happy birthday. The town of Wendell turned 117 this past Friday. So we've come a long way. All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.